called Wellbutrin that is prescribed for depression, and it has a long and successful clinical history. Some number of years ago, a few people taking Wellbutrin noticed that their cravings for cigarettes went down. GlaxoSmithKline, the makers, tested it and found that the drug was a highly effective aid in smoking cessation. So they repackaged it, the exact same drug, under the name Zyban, and that is prescribed today to help people stop smoking. Now think about that. No one contemplated Wellbutrin as a smoking drug. It only became one because users of the medicine happened to notice it had that effect. How many unseen connections like there are this in the universe? Causes and effects that we cannot perceive because they are buried in the infinitude of data that populates the universe. I think there are millions. Another example, children in schools with fluorescent lighting get fewer cavities than children in schools with incandescent lighting. Why is this? Fluorescent lighting actually stimulates the body's production of saliva, which prevents tooth decay. The subtle interplay of everything in the universe with everything else in the universe is dramatically more complex than we're able to understand. Our ability to find cause and effect within it is highly suspect. We stumble upon causal associations almost by accident, like the scientific equivalent of your chocolate is in my peanut butter. However, this state of affairs will soon change due to the convergence of four trends: the reduction in cost to essentially zero of four things. Now, three of these are well known to everyone in this room: the cost of storing data, the cost of moving data, and the cost of performing calculations on data. But the fourth one is a bit more subtle. It is a reduction to essentially zero in the cost of collecting and recording data. Presently, there is a minuscule amount of data actually in digital form. And I'm not talking about medical records that are in paper form and getting those to digital form. I mean the trillions of pieces of data that are created every second on this planet. Soon, all of this data will be collected passively due to the widespread proliferation of cheap sensors, whose cost is also rocketing to essentially zero. This covering of the planet in sensors will not be done by any central organization. It is already happening because of the immense improvements data can provide our lives. A camera mounted on my house that scans the faces of everybody who knocks on my door to see if they're criminals is a good unto itself, but it also passively creates data. A skillet that detects botulism and remembers everything ever cooked in it so that it can be recreated is useful in and of itself, and as a byproduct creates data. The cost of collecting this data will fall to zero soon. It will become ubiquitous, and the impact of this, combined with the other three trends, will be profound. It will be profound for the planet, and it will be profound for business. And if you'll indulge me for just a moment in the big picture, I will explain why I think this is actionable today, and not just actionable, but essential today. Now, I'm tempted to jump straight ahead to how I think this will change marketing and how marketers target. But in doing so, I feel like I would do a disservice by neglecting the enormity of the change which I feel is about to descend upon the world. So if you will indulge me while I walk through how all of this is going to change your personal lives, I will fully address how I also think it will change your professional lives as well. Now, as the cost of recording, storing, and manipulating data drops towards zero, the amount of data that is so recorded will explode. In fact, it already is. It's hard to contemplate just how big this is, just how big big data is. Not just logging the weather, but the temperature of 1 million places logged every second. And not just the price of an item, but the price of every item ever sold on the planet. Personal data as well, willingly shared with anonymity and privacy safeguards in place, will explode as well. So what kind of data would you be willing to share to help the powerful algorithms used to maximize your life experience? You're watching TV and you're flipping through the channels. Every channel you pause on, every channel you watch, every channel you come back to, all perfectly logged. In the kitchen, your pan logs everything you cook in it, but every piece of silverware you own knows that you're the holder, and it calculates the calories of every bite of food that you consume. So think about everything being recorded. Everything you buy, every meal you eat, every restaurant you visit, the time you have your sprinkler set to turn on, when you last went to the dentist. Imagine if it were all recorded for your own personal use. After all, it is your data. Every song you download and how many times you play it, every person you meet, everything your body does, every beat of your heart, every word you say, every breath you take, everything your eye tracks to, and your physiological response to it, everything. Imagine if it was all recorded, all of it, a real digital echo of your life. Love it or hate it, this is the inevitable direction technology is heading. This logging is a byproduct of all the kinds of things we want computers to do for us. It is profound because if we can passively collect all of the data that our lives generate, we will have created a collective memory for the planet, a record of every cause and effect. This would be a monumental accomplishment. This is not just the end of forgetting. It would mean that finally humanity has an extremely robust collective memory. And we need not learn and forget, learn and forget, learn and forget for eons. We could learn and remember. Everyone's life experience, every action and its outcome becomes the data that powers and makes everybody else's life better. Let's talk a moment about privacy. I'm interested in things that we have built the internet to do that have no offline corollary. These teach us things about ourselves. Like I already knew people wanted to sell the stuff in their attic or send money to people before eBay and PayPal came along because the offline world had already invented garage sales and Western Union. But Twitter? Well, that tells us something about ourselves we didn't really know. In fact, it tells us a lot of things about ourselves. Overall, I'm really proud of the kinds of things we are building the internet to do. It reflects well on us. We are building the internet to connect with each other, to share information, to collaborate, to offer mutual support, and so on. I know the list of nefarious uses of the internet, but on balance, we are building it for good purposes. Now, one pretty big surprise was how much we were willing to expend time and energy for total strangers with no hope of getting anything in return. No money, no fame, no glory, no nothing. And you see it all over the internet. You post some personal problem that you have, and people will give you advice. They will take time to write a great big long forum post for you, a total stranger they will never meet. It's nice, isn't it? We have a natural desire to want to help others. So if people feel their privacy is being safeguarded, I believe they will willingly contribute their data anonymously to the greater good. When I buy a book on Amazon, I know they use that fact anonymously to suggest that book to someone else later. Now, over time, people will see that they will be contributing to the construction of a knowledge base, which really is a complete recording of every action of every member of humanity, and that this information will be used to better the lives of other people in very real ways, which we will soon see. So let's assume people do share their digital echoes anonymously, and assume we had the ability to ask it questions that have never been asked before and get instant answers. We could start looking around for the lines that connect things we didn't previously think were connected. Why is it that gasoline made from some oil refinery burns more effectively? And why is it that the population of some endangered animal is declining everywhere but one place? And why are traffic jams fewer in certain cities than other cities of the same size? Why are dropout rates in some schools lower than demographically matched schools in other parts of the world? So let's dive deeper into one part of this, say the medical implications. Imagine everyone who had skin cancer voluntarily shared their digital echo file on an anonymous basis. Say they included the mapping of their genome, as well as every single thing they did in their daily lives, every food they ate, every exercise they did, every song, everything that had been passively logged. Now, with skin cancer, like all diseases, some people get better over time and some people get worse, and we really don't know why. So imagine a computer culling through all of this data, inconceivably large, and pulling out patterns. And a finding might look like this. People who eat radishes get slightly better than people who don't. Now, you don't know if the radishes make the people better, or if something that makes people crave radishes helps them get better. So what do? You dig deeper into the data. And then we see that only people in certain parts of the country are getting better. Now, why would this be the case? The data shows certain pockets where radish efficacy is substantially higher and others where it's non-existent. The computers would then see that most of the people who got better bought their radishes in stores that were stocked from certain farms. And not just certain farms, but farms that used a certain pesticide. And not just a certain pesticide, but a pesticide that contained a certain chemical. So the machine surfaces this information and we act on it. Brilliant doctors try to understand what is happening, and drug companies commission studies to see if this particular chemical, frequently found in radish pesticides, known to be harmless to humans, might actually just cure skin cancer. So they run trials, and they find that in the majority of cases it does, and yet in some it has no effect. The machines again churn on the data and surface that it's effective when a person has a certain common, though not universal, genetic marker. Wow, now think about that. All of a sudden you have this magnificent piece of knowledge that for people who have a certain genetic marker, this pesticide ingredient will cure their cancer. Findings like this are impossible today. There is no mechanism that can decipher the complex interactions of everything on the planet with everything else. Today we discover things like, Wellbutrin helps people stop smoking through chance and dumb luck. So you can see where it's all headed. Instead of creating hypotheses and constructing experiments and then modifying the hypotheses and retesting, we can make all of history a controlled experiment in retrospect. And then we will come to understand the outliers better. Why do some people live to be 120? They are inexplicably the ones who seem to eat like a stick of butter every night before bed. And what is it about their lives that makes them live so long and well? Is it genetic? And if so, which genes? Is it behavioral, psychological? I'm eager to know. And finally, this system will not just solve for human illness, but all kinds of other problems as well. Patterns in crime will be discovered. Why do some houses get broken into and others don't? Can the system learn to predict crime targets? All kinds of social issues will be examined. Why are some areas poorer than others? And why do people stay in school in certain areas more than in others? And on and on. A record of all human activity with anonymity safeguards in place allows us to all become part of the solution. All of us will put our minds to work on the problems of the world. I take great comfort in this. I think the answer to life's mysteries are buried there in the data, waiting for us to coax it out. And thus the world can be transformed, because most of our vexing problems as a civilization are technological in nature. Disease is a technological problem. Hunger is a technological problem. Poverty is a technological problem. And being that they are technological problems, they will have technological solutions. And think about this, marketing is a technological problem as well. And the problem can be stated, how to deliver a relevant message to a relevant person at a relevant time. I believe this world I described, this world we are already entering, will transform how marketing is done. And while using this big data, will probably not utilize the highly personal data I just used in the example. It will use other data sources that are not tied to individuals. For you see, I think we make a fundamental error when we use data to give us insights into marketing. We generally only look at data where we understand the possible causal link. We let our marketing techniques be shaped by our assumptions about cause and effect. We construct a narrative that we understand and then try to validate it with data. We look at factors like age, income, gender, education, seasonality, locale, and dozens more because we believe we can understand the link between those factors and actions. We assume, for instance, that the most relevant factor as to when people will buy a swimsuit is the time of year. But we don't really know that because we haven't ever looked at any other factors. We just assume it because we understand it. But there's no reason to suppose that our ability to comprehend the causality of an association has anything at all to do with how real it is. We are quite comfortable with quirky relationships between things when we understand their cause. Did you know, for instance, that when times turn bad, beer sales in stores rise and beer sales in bars fall? It's theorized that people don't drink more in bad times, but they do buy alcohol at cheaper price points. We get this, it makes sense. And did you know the use of coupons is an inverse corollary to the economic strength? And we kind of get that, we understand why. Or that the time it takes to get a call back from a contractor is an indicator of the strength of the economy. Good times equal long waits, as the contractors are all busy. Or even that the attractiveness of wait staff is an inverse indicator to economic strength. When times are bad, the beautiful people will take wait jobs when they would have had more lucrative ones otherwise. And so we have no problems with relationships between seemingly unrelated things when we understand them. But I'm urging you to explore the possibility that there are many, many times that many relationships between things that are impossible for us to explain. For instance, why do people who win Academy Awards outlive the people that are nominated and lose? I have no idea. I don't even know anybody who has a theory. Why do first basemen outlive, statistically, the other players on the team? I have no idea. There is so much data that abounds that we never even look at because we don't intuitively understand how there could be any useful causal chain. Now, in a world where analysis is difficult and expensive, this makes perfect sense. You pick your battles. But the cost of studying data for correlation has plummeted, while the amount of data in digital form is skyrocketing. There are, without a doubt, countless causalities waiting to be discovered, and even when they are discovered, we may never understand them. Now, I understand some of you may be skeptical of this. Nobody wants to be that guy at work caught studying how you can target consumers based on the point spread of basketball games or by their astrological sign or some other unrelated factor. Nobody wants their office nickname to be Moonbeam. Moonbeam is never entrusted with the key to the executive washroom. But consider giving it a shot. Look around for data sources you have, regardless of their topic, and make an inventory of them. Who knows what knowledge lies in them, waiting for you to coax it out? You might just revolutionize your industry, for this approach is truly game-changing. And I would suggest you not just open your mind to situations where A causes B, or where A indicates B. To find correlations like this are actually pretty hard. Instead, be open to situations where A and B correlate because they are both influenced by an unknown and indeterminate X factor. What does this mean? Well, what if you discovered that people who wear ties are also inclined to shave in the morning? You wouldn't conclude that wearing ties cause facial hair to grow. Rather, we would understand that the X factor here is gender. Men wear ties and men shave facial hair. There are all kinds of X factors at play in the world, lurking behind the scenes, the unseen puppet masters of the universe around us. There's a story about a man named Mandelbrot that illustrates this a bit better. Mandelbrot was a mathematician, and he's known as the father of fractal geometry. In fact, he coined the term fractal, and he just recently passed away, but back in 1960, he worked for IBM, and he was studying the distribution of incomes in the economy, big incomes and small incomes, and how they distribute. And he knew what that distribution looked like, what that graph looked like. And one day, he was going to Harvard to give a talk, and he popped in to visit a professor friend of his. And lo and behold, on that professor's chalkboard was his graph. And he's saying, how in the world did my graph get here before I did? But it turned out the graph had nothing to do with income distribution. It was that professor who was charting cotton prices over the course of 8 years. And so it's not that one of those factors influences the other, rather that the dynamics that drive them both have an unseen commonality. And the point is it's not necessary to understand what that is, only to know that it is so. The history of science is full of chance discoveries, mistakes that offer a flash of insight. We know so many of them, they are part of our culture. Cellophane, discovered by accident. Penicillin, accident. Even saccharin and silly putty, accidents, and hundreds more. This is because there are such limits to our ability to intuitively understand how the universe works. And this applies even to scientists, the vanguards of reason. We are locked into our narratives, the stories we construct to explain what we observe and to make ourselves feel like the universe is a predictable place. And to a degree, it is. Cause and effect are very real, but they are also far more complex and subtle than our minds can cope with. And so I say, try to be okay with that. Look far and wide and be open to serendipity. And so I urge you to persevere and ignore the doubts about your sanity and competence proffered by your naysaying coworkers, and instead discover a connection that is truly new. This will give you a real advantage over the staid and stodgy competition that cannot conceptually believe something they do not understand the cause of. But what they don't realize is that much of the universe and life itself is exactly like that. Your chance discovery, like the connection between Wellbutrin and smoking, might be quite profound, and without you finding it, it may lay hidden for decades or even for all time. You may just change your industry and discover something truly extraordinary. Thank you very much.
Byron, you echoed in some sense something that started our show, which is a sort of an openness to looking at more connections. How do you have any ideas about how to institutionalize them, how to operationalize them, so that with these vast amounts of data, there are some sorts of disciplines that we can enact in institutions that allow us to find those connections, to get us beyond the limitations that keep us from it?
I don't know if we're quite there yet. I mean, like, that's even something I'm working through. I was going to talk about that somewhat, but I think it's so domain specific because data manifests itself in different industries like so radically different. The tools to study it are so different. I don't know any generalizable pieces of advice for that.
But to some degree, it has to do with exposing the right people within the company to the data. Right, it's sort of coming up with a way to ensure that people who maybe wouldn't have their fingers in the data to begin with actually get access to them and can start imagining what it does.
It is going to be fascinating because as the amount of data grows, our ability to kind of cope with it diminishes. And so we're going to have to build all these tools that allow us to interface with it at a much higher level and to be able to ask very simple questions that do very, very complicated things. And when we build those tools, you know, the plumber in Detroit can work on a cure for cancer just by asking the system question after question.
Is this when you started and you sort of you built the broader vision of what a world of sensors tied to data delivery can do? At that level, is this something that's market-driven or policy-driven? Is this something, when we're starting to work at that level, of that level of recording of data,
Right.
Is that something that needs to be driven by policy in terms of knowing when and where we will measure and when and where we won't measure?
I mean, I think it's driven by the market and it needs to be constrained. It's exuberant, somewhat constrained by policy.
Byron, Reese, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting.